we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the menorah, right? So here we have the menorah, right, with the 7 branches. And this is a main. So the menorah, we said, is a reference to the source of the entire Jewish people in heaven, in a place called Malchus, and Malchus of Atzilus, referred to as Knesset Yisrael. This is the place where all of the souls come together and we become like a menorah. What's the connection between the menorah and the Jewish people? So we're told that there were 70 souls that descended into Egypt. This is in Parshas Vayigash. And so the 70 souls stand for the 7 emotions. But if you take the 7 emotions, each one has got 10 components. Each one has 10 parts. There we go. The 10 sfirot, namely Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. So if each of the 7 the 7 emotions have got 10 parts, that's the 70 souls. But they all comprise basically one menorah. And what do we see about the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash? We see 2 things. Number one, that it was one solid piece of gold. It wasn't made of different parts and attached, but it had to be made from one solid piece of gold. That represents the absolute integral, inherent unity of the entire Jewish people, meaning that we are all absolutely one, on the one hand, and on the other hand, that there are 7 branches means that there's going to be the 7 different ways, 7 different components, 7 different aspects. So there's going to be different ways that different Jewish people present and serve Hashem and all of that. But that doesn't take away from the essential unity of the entire Jewish people. Reb David, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how this fits in with the 12 tribes.
What's the problem?
Well, there's 12 tribes, that each tribe has a particular way, derech. And here we're saying that there's 7 branches, it seems, that each way has a particular.
So there are different places where the different numbers come into play. Here we're talking about in the world of Atzilus. In the world of Atzilus, the number 12 does not come into play quite yet. 12 becomes manifest when that light from the highest spiritual world comes down into the world of Bria, into the world of creation. Then you have the 12 tribes. And that's the idea of the number 12, something splitting up into the 12. And thus the Zohar tells us that there's the higher chariot that is represented by the forefathers. And then there's the lower chariot represented by the 12 tribes, and that's in the world of Bria. But here we're talking about in Malchus of Atzilus. So in the world of Malchus of Atzilus, we don't really have the manifestation of the 12 at this point. Here we have it. We have the manifestation of the 7. Now you do have the manifestation of 4, and each of the 4 has 3 components. So that is, it's there in a general sense. But here we're talking this is a different numeric system for the in the world of Atzilus, representing the emotions. All right, so that's what we've spoken about until now. And so,
one more question.
Sure.
If you when you add up the 3 forefathers and the 4 mothers, that's 7. So does that have any connection between the 7 that you're talking about?
Interesting. I don't know. Maybe these 7 are the 7. I mean, the normal things of the 7 are going to be the 7 days of the week. Those were the 7 days of creation, of course. And those are that becomes really the divine palette through which all of existence comes about. But it also becomes the model for the Jewish people, as we are part and parcel of creation. We also have the idea of, in the lower world, we have becomes manifest what are called the 70 officers of the 70 nations, right? So we know 70 is not just a number associated with the Jewish people, it's that you have 70 nations of the world. But that's already talking about a lower manifestation. Here in this mimer, we're talking about the menorah, which is a much higher manifestation in the world of Atzilus. So now we continue on. So now that we established that the Jewish people are compared to the 7 branches of the menorah, we can go back to the analogy and learn out a lesson from the fact that Aaron was the one to light up these 7 branches of the menorah. So we know that Aaron was the first one commanded regarding the lighting of the menorah. Now, in fact, the menorah could be lit by any Kohen. Truth to be told, according to halacha, the menorah could actually be lit even by a non-Kohen. There are many things that had to be done by a Kohen. But lighting the menorah was not one of them. Now, a non-Kohen couldn't get into the Kodesh, the place where the menorah was, so there's a technical difficulty. But be that as it may, the first person who we see who's commanded regarding the lighting is Aaron, and he's told, Behetivo es haneros, when he arranges the lamps in the morning, and then when he lights the menorah in the evening, in the afternoon, I should say. So this is Aaron. So what's the idea of Aaron lighting the menorah? We're going to see that when Aaron is lighting the menorah, basically it means that you light up our life. That when Aaron is lighting the menorah, he's lighting up our life with the love of Hashem. He's giving us the capacity to engage and draw out the inner love in our heart to love Hashem. We're going to see this as we continue on. So now Aaron, who is referred to as in the Zohar language, he's called the Shushvina, the Matrunisa, the escort of the queen. We'll see soon what this means. It is this Aaron who is a Kohen that serves Hashem, who is exalted, and is one of the 7 shepherds of the Jewish people that nourish us spiritually and give over the revelation of godliness into this level of the Knesset Yisrael. They draw us closer to that godliness. So he explains that the term escort of the queen means that just like when a king and queen get married, each has an escort that bring them to the marriage canopy, the chuppah, right? That's how we get married today as well. We say that the chatan is dom el melech, that the bridegroom is like the king and the kala is like the queen. So the king and the queen are coming together to unite in holy matrimony under the chuppah, and we have people who accompany them and bring them to the chuppah. This is actually a position of, because of their honor and their prestige, so they are going with an accompaniment. So too the Jewish people and Hashem have, as it were, escorts that enable them to come together meaningfully. Moshe is called the escort of the king, since he brings Hashem's revelation down to us through the Torah. So Moshe is, so to speak, bringing God closer to the Jews. And Aaron is called the escort of the queen, since we, the Jewish people, are like Hashem's queen, and Aaron enables us to go up spiritually towards Hashem through the service of prayer. So Aaron is the one who's bringing us closer to Hashem. Moshe is the one bringing God closer to us, and thus we come together and we meet under the chuppah. But what does it mean that he is so first of all, we mentioned an idea of the the seven shepherds. So the idea of the shepherd, a shepherd is the one who brings the sheep to pasture. So the spiritual shepherds are the one that bring us to our spiritual pasture, that allow us to reach various spiritual levels. So what does Aaron do? What does it mean that he lights up our life? He kindles our menorah. So the Rebbe continues, he nourishes us spiritually by causing the love of Hashem to shine in us with a fiery yearning to connect to Hashem, so strong that we feel as though we could expire from the intensity of that love. This love goes up in our hearts like a flame that rises by itself after it is ignited. So he lights up our inner menorah to have the expression of the love of Hashem, and thereby fulfilling the mitzvah of loving Hashem that we accept when we say the Shema every day. So it's possible, I'm sure many people here have recited the Shema today, and it's possible that you said Shema Yisrael, and for sure when you said the Shema, you had in mind the absolute oneness of Hashem in the heavens above, in the world below, that there's nothing aside from God. This is the kavanah, the intention that one needs to have with the Shema. That's a requirement according to Jewish law. But after we talk about that amazing unity of God, so now comes the hard part. The hard part is v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. You shall love Hashem your God. If everything that we said about God is true and we really accept it, so now we have to feel a great attraction to Hashem, that we love Hashem. But this is hard for us human beings. We have so many things getting in the way. So the point in this mimer is that we have we get help. We get help in this spiritual quest. I'm sorry, let me see that question that you asked. Oh no, it's not mandatory to stand when we recite the Shema. In fact, in the Shema it says you could do it, you say the Shema when you're sitting in your home, and when you're going on the way, and when you're lying down, and when you're getting up. And Beis Shammai said that in the morning when you get up, you have to say the Shema rising, getting up. You have to be standing up. Beis Hillel said no, because it already told us, B'shach b'chov kumecha, when you're any way you are. And we, of course, rule like Beis Hillel. We rule like Hillel, that we recite the Shema standing or sitting. Mystically, it is appropriate that one should be seated when they're reciting the Shema. Interestingly, right? The Amida, on the other hand, means standing up. So the Amida, that's a requirement to be standing up if one is able to stand. But the Shema we recite sitting, and it's preferable to actually be sitting. We don't sit down for the Shema, but we make sure that we're seated already beforehand, so that when we get to the Shema, we're seated. What's the difference between standing and sitting in terms of our service to Hashem? Why would you say that you need to stand at this particular spot, or why would you say that you need to specifically be seated at this particular spot? What do these ideas represent?
Standing would represent honor and respect.
Very good, right? So there's a great honor and respect, and in the Amida, when we're reciting the Amida, we are actually standing before God, supplicating before the king. So you don't do that sitting down. You have to be doing that standing up. The question is, why don't we prostrate? Why don't we just totally lie down flat as totally bowing down to Hashem? It's a good question. So we only do that in the Beis Hamikdash. But indeed, when we're making our supplication before the king, before Hashem himself, so that is the idea of Amidah. That's why for Amidah we are standing. It's a crucial part of it. Whereas the idea of sitting is the idea of sitting means something that you want something to become absorbed into you. So you're telling me, Susan, that they wouldn't stand for it, huh? Susan, what would they not stand for? There are a lot of people who don't stand for a lot of stuff in Shul, but you're saying they wouldn't stand for the Shema or they wouldn't stand for the Amidah? For the Shema. So that they were acting correctly. So we don't stand for the Shema. And the reason is that we are meant to draw this idea into ourselves and internalize it. So if somebody comes to my house and I ask them to sit down and take a seat, what am I asking them to do? I'm asking them to sit down and become part of this environment, to stick around a while, right? It's as opposed to if someone is standing up, it's more like they're here, they're on their way out. Not for the Amidah, of course, that's a different story. But the idea of sitting means that you're taking it in. And during the Shema, you want to be taking it in and absorbing it internally. So we sit for the Shema. So have you ever recited the Shema and you had such great intention when you were thinking about the oneness of God and the entire universe? Immediately you had this great love of Hashem and wanted to just totally commune with Hashem himself? So when you said the word v'ahavta, you shall love Hashem your God, you were right there. All right. It might not happen every time we say the Shema. Maybe it happens sometimes. But the point that the Alter Rebbe is making here is that we get help. We get a helping hand. We have a spiritual shepherd, namely Aaron, the high priest, who ignites our menorah and gives us the ability that when we get to the Shema, we should actually be able to feel the love and thereby fulfilling the mitzvah of loving Hashem that we accept when we say the Shema every day. He enables, right? He empowers us so that this love that we strive for in Kriya Shema should be experienced in absolute truth and fixed in the heart of each and every Jew. So we know this is not an easy thing. A person of his own accord who is physical and involved in material matters is not able to accomplish this if Hashem doesn't help him. And this help is a love from Hashem from above that draws the person towards him. And this power comes to us through Aaron. So this is a very interesting mystical concept that we actually have a helper. We have an agent. We have a love agent who helps us get to that love, and that is Aaron, the high priest. And that idea of Aaron kindling the menorah, that he's kindling our inner neshama to be able to feel the love of God. Okay, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think one of the things that suggests to me, so to speak, on an everyday basis, if you will, is that the Shliach Tzibor is part of his obligation besides proper execution of the of tefillah, but also the spiritual tech to help foster a kindling of love of Hashem. So it's not merely a performance of the obvious routine, but there's a spiritual component as well.
So what do you do if you're in a place that the Shliach Tzibor is not doing that?
Which unfortunately, more often than not, that's the case. Then you just have to kind of put yourself in a cocoon and try to relate to Hashem that way.
Exactly, right? So don't wait for the chazan to be there. So I find it to be not useful to me if I'm saying, well, for me to get there, I need to have the chazan who is going to help me get there. The Mimer is telling us something more amazing. Aaron, the high priest, Moshe's brother, is going to help you get there. How's that? The chazan, sometimes you go to a shul, sometimes you have a chazan who's into it, and through his prayer, you can get into it. But most of the time, as you say, that's not the case. And most people, davening is a very hard thing. It's a very personal thing. And oftentimes it's done in a perfunctory fashion. And that's, so if one wants to make this real, you have to do it you have to be willing to do it on your own. You can't be waiting for everybody else to do it or anybody to help you do it. You're getting the help directly from Aaron, the Kohen Gadol of the Jewish people. My Kohen Gadol. I mean, if you'd be in a shul where they daven with kavana, it would take a long time also. People aren't necessarily willing to sit for that long.
Yeah.
So
it reminds me of things that people have said to me, or I've heard discussed. That one says to another, "What nusach do you daven?" And the answer is, "I prefer nusach schnell."
Nusach Schnell, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So listen, I don't mean to judge. I mean, we can all judge our own tefillah or our own lack of kavana, and everybody's got to, I would say this is an area that anybody who davens is going to have a certain challenge, and we have to figure out ways to work on it, really in our own personal space, or as you say, in our own personal cocoon, right? And to make our own davening meaningful without. And we've discussed this before. If you're looking at what everybody else is doing, that's definitely not going to help your kavana. I remember when I was, I don't know, around 19 years old or so, I was davening in 770 in the back on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. And there was an older Jew, Rab Elia Chaim Reutblatt. He was from the old country, long way, and he was davening there with such kavana. And it was so beautiful to watch and to listen to his sweet words and sweet praises of Hashem issuing forth from his mouth. And it was beautiful to hear. You don't see that so often, and it's not something that in our day and age, most people, it seems, don't necessarily appreciate it. So one really, you gotta find it. you gotta develop it on your own and not worry with everybody else. Today, if you're davening slow and you're davening out loud and you're saying the words in a sweet way, a lot of places that's not, they would look at you, that's not even normal, which is sad, isn't it? Because it should be normal. It should be the norm for every Jew. But we can all work on our own tefillah. That's the object. Okay, going back to the mimer. Now, so earlier we said, and we asked the question, so we setting up of the menorah. I mean, it would have made sense to, when you're ready to light the menorah. So do you have a menorah that you use for Hanukkah, right? So when do you normally clean out the old wax and set up the new candles? When do you do that? Do you do that sometime during the day? You wake up in the morning and you do that? You do it in the afternoon, or you wait until it's time to light the menorah, then you clean out the old and arrange the new. Anybody? Nobody wants to weigh in on this? But in the menorah and the Beis Hamikdash, there was a two-part thing. So in the morning, it was arranged. And that's when they brought the incense offering in the morning. And then it was lit in the afternoon when they brought the afternoon incense offering. Okay? And now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this two-part process. This is the meaning of the two phrases, that he will bring up the fire of the lamp, bahalos. Bahalos, that's the lighting. That was the second part. And then the first part, which was he will fix it. And that was the arranging of the menorah. For our sages said in Yuma, this is not regarding the lighting of the menorah, but this is regarding the offering on the altar. It says like this, it says, even though there is a fire that descends from heaven onto the Mizbeach to consume the offering. So this is one of the miracles that occurred in the Beis Hamikdash. And I believe it even occurred in the second Beis Hamikdash until through the time that Shimon HaTzadik was the high priest. I think it may have stopped after that. So there was this amazing miracle. Fire would descend from heaven and consume the offering on the altar. Wow. This is just like in the story with Elijah at Mount Carmel, right? He summoned the divine fire from above, and the fire came and consumed Elijah's prophet. But this happened every single day in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, if there was a fire coming from below, here's the question. Did they have to arrange a fire? Did the Kohanim have to arrange a fire to burn the korban, the offering on? So it says in the Talmud that even though there's a fire that descends from the heaven, it is a mitzvah for a fire to be made on the Mizbeach, mina hedjit, meaning from a mortal human being. Meaning, right? So this is the idea. This is a whole idea here. This is a paradigm. So oftentimes, what we're going to be talking about over here are two different forms of service of God and inspiration, divine inspiration. So I assume that everybody sitting here, one time in their life, at least, maybe many times, you get this divine inspiration where you feel connected, you feel godliness, you feel connected, right? And it's so wonderful. And then if you daven when you have that feeling, it's so beautiful, it's so sweet. Then there are times that we have to develop our own feeling of inspiration. We have to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, so to speak. We have to really do our own work. We have to meditate. We have to think. We have to look into the Siddur and look into the English and see what it means. And we work to develop our kavana muscle, our intention muscle. We're not feeling it. I don't feel blown away. I don't feel super excited, right? But it's my offering from below, you see? So there's the fire from above, which is when we feel that divine inspiration from above. And there is the fire from below, which is how we bring ourselves into that divine service. And what we see here is that in the Beis Hamikdash, you needed both. As it says in the Talmud Yuma, that even though there's this fire coming from above, you have to bring your own fire. You have to bring your own fire to the table. Don't rely merely on God sending you this great divine gift. You have to work on developing your own divine fire. Let's see in the words of the Alter Rebbe. Let me just see if I can get speaking of divine fire, got to get my computer plugged in properly again. Anyway. So Perush, the deeper meaning of this is as follows. The fire on the Mizbeach that consumes the offerings is a metaphor for the love of Hashem in our heart that consumes the animal soul's passions. So here we're bringing in also the idea of the, what's the animal being brought? The animal is our own animalistic desires, our own animalistic tendencies that we have. Sorry, just have to get my hassle. There, I think I'm connected. Okay. Getting my computer plugged in. Okay. Just like on the Mizbeach, there were two types of fire. The fire that came from above and a fire, man-made fire. So too, there are two types of fierly love of Hashem. One is the gift from above. And one which is the man-made effort. The fire that comes from the man-made effort represents the love of Hashem that a person awakens in himself, coming from a recognition of Hashem's kingship as it is in the worlds, that Hashem is a great and awesome king over all worlds above him. This whole section now is a meditation, an idea that one can immerse their mind in to bring themselves to understanding of the glory of God, to conjure, to create, to manufacture, I should say, this love of Hashem. So let's read this again. So it awakened inside of himself a recognition of Hashem's kingship as it's found in the worlds. What do we think about? That Hashem is a great, awesome king over all the worlds above and below. And then to think further, and the hosts of heaven bow to you. And there are thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of angels that stand before him. As it is explained in the Gemara and the Zohar, how many different types of worlds there are, which this all brings out Hashem's greatness. So the entire, again, a lot of these words are things that are maybe a little used to it. But the point of it is that there's a whole spiritual spectrum that is all totally nullified to Hashem. In a similar idea, we find that the sages instituted to say, "Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom," after the first verse of the Shema and before the next verse of V'ahavta, and you shall love Hashem. So let's get to this in a moment. First, I want to talk a little bit about the angels. So when you think about all of the angels bowing down to Hashem, does that inspire you? Yes, no, maybe? And has anybody had an experience? So Susan, okay, you're a sensitive soul, very good. So the idea is that the angels are not encumbered by the physical layer that's put on top of us that removes our understanding. What if that physical layer was peeled away? Then we would just be aware of God and be totally aware of God's presence. We would be totally blown away by Hashem's power and might and his presence and how he's bringing everything into vitality at every single moment. If you would be able to see the streams of the divine energy being drawn into your own self to bring you into existence and to bring your soul into existence, you wouldn't be able to do anything other than be blown away by Hashem. So when we think about the angels, that's basically that is the whole world, the whole dimension where you don't have the physicality getting in the way. And so what is the outcome? The outcome is that they are all totally, perfectly serving Hashem. They are bowing down, that all of the hosts of heaven bow to Hashem. This is also, the Gemara explains, this is taken in a literal sense. It says that the Shekhinah is in the west. So the sun rises in the east, and then it bows as we see in the sky, the sun is bowing to the west, meaning that the sun is rising and then it's bowing to Hashem. What about the stars? Do the stars rise and set? Yes, they do. If you look up at the stars, you look on the eastern horizon, you'll see the constellations begin, and then they go over them. We're talking particularly the stars, the zodiac, the ones that are on the ecliptic. They rise up in the east and then they go down. Okay, now of course, according to modern science, we have a different understanding of why this is happening. But the Gemara looks at this and says it's happening because all of existence is bowing down to Hashem, who is in the west. And to realize that all entities are totally nullified before Hashem, we would have to get a little bit of FOMO, feeling of missing out. Everything is totally nullified to Hashem. What about me? I want to be nullified to Hashem as well. I want to feel that glory of Hashem. And so these are the thoughts and these are the ideas that we think about in order to manufacture a love of Hashem in our own mind, in our own heart. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to say that this is the idea of reciting the Baruch Shem in the daily Shema. So, when we recite the Shema, we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. What is the next line in the Torah? If you read this right out of the Torah, out of Parshas Va'eschanan, the next line is V'ahavta eis Hashem Elokecha b'chol lebavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol meodecha. 1 second. So what happened to Baruch Shem? Baruch Shem was inserted by the rabbis. The rabbis said you need to put in this line in between. Why? Well, he says here, in a similar way, in a similar idea, we find that the sages instituted to say Baruch Shem, which means we're blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom, after the first verse of the Shema, and before the next verse of V'ahavta, that you shall love God. Why? Since by contemplating Hashem's glorious kingdom in the creation and supervision over millions of worlds and infinite creatures, etc., a Jew will then be able to truly experience the love of Hashem, because we're going to talk about the way that God's glory is felt over all of existence. I'm going to share with you there's quite a beautiful story told. When we recite the Shema, according to Chassidic understanding, the Shema Yisrael is bringing across the following idea: that everything is incorporated within God. There is nothing outside of Hashem. Ein od milvado. Hashem is Elokeinu, the Havaya, the four-letter name of God. This is Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the heavens above, the world below, all four directions. Everything is totally nullified to Hashem. Everything is totally, absolutely, not that it takes a second seat to Hashem, but there is no existence except for Hashem. There is just God. We've spoken about this before. You've studied before in the second book of Tanya, the Shar HaYichud v'Ha'amunah. And so there's nothing except for God. The Alter Rebbe was once traveling with his Chassidim, and they reached a particular city. Maybe it was Prabust. Prabust was the place where the grandson of the Maggid of Mezrich lived. His name was Shalom Shachna of Prabust. And he died young, but he left over a son, and the son was 10 years old. His name was Yisrael. And he met the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was already an older man. And this little Yisraelik was a 10-year-old child. And he said, and the Alter Rebbe would feel really a kinship to this young boy, because this young boy's great-grandfather was the Maggid of Mizrich, his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's teacher. And his grandfather was the Alter Rebbe's study partner, his Chavrusa, Rabbi Avram de Malach. So what was the question of the 10-year-old boy? Listen closely. He said, you recite the Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, and you become totally aware of the absolute presence of God, and that everything else doesn't exist. There's nothing except for Hashem. It's just Hashem, God. There's nothing. There's nothing except for Hashem. So how could the verse continue that you should love Hashem? Love already is it's a holy feeling, but it's a feeling of the ego. You can only love something when you feel yourself. I love this. I love that. If you're totally nullified, there's no feeling of love. There's no emotion. There's no me. There's just God. So how can you have v'ahavta, to love God, following this massive awareness that there's nothing except for Hashem? The Alter Rebbe looked at his followers and said, none of you ever came up with this question. We have to wait for this 10-year-old boy. This 10-year-old boy turned out to become who was called the Holy Rizhiner, Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin. From him came forth many different Chassidic movements that you may not have heard of. But they still exist to this day. Many of them still exist. So this was the question of the 10-year-old boy. In a sense, we come down off of there's nothing except for Hashem to kind of a lower level. It is the name Hashem, whose glory we can actually feel, which means that we now exist, and praising the impact of Hashem in our existence, right? So that's why we have Baruch Shem, because you're right, at the level of the Shema itself, we shouldn't be able to come to V'ahavta, like this little boy remarked. Yehudis, please.
Yes. I don't understand the idea of the angels. Something new to me, actually, I guess. If there's only Hashem, which is what I agree on, how do the angels fit in? When were they developed or composed, or where are they? And how are we supposed to visualize them also? With the image of the angel? And
you're putting two different concepts together here. So when you're talking about that there's nothing before except for Hashem, your question shouldn't be about the angels. Your question is, what about me? What about us? Where do we go? And wherever we go, that's where the angels go. We'll talk about it another time. It's basically we come to an awareness that everything that seems to exist is really a non-existence in Hashem. It's a deep idea to be expanded upon at another time. But now, just to get to the issue of the angels itself, the way that God brought about existence, there was a process. Okay? And the process is described at great length in Kabbalistic writings, right? And at a certain point in that process, particularly going from the world of Atzilut down into the world of Bria, now there comes about various spiritual agencies, messengers that bring the divine light in different ways to different places. And this is what we call an angel. In Hebrew, the word, we have this great, beautiful word, a malach, an angel. In English, it's an angel. But the word malach in Hebrew actually means a messenger. So the word malach is used in the Torah as a messenger.
Right.
Now, it could also be, when Yaakov, next week's Torah portion, right? Yaakov is to his brother. That's the simple pshat. Rashi has a different simple pshat. Rashi says he sent actual angels. The story, we're not going to discuss that. But the point is, the word malach in Hebrew means messenger. And so they are divine agents, basically, carrying out the divine will as the worlds become lower and lower. And I'm going to use words, but they're only words. God, so to speak, in creating a world that was a part, not where godliness isn't apparent, but God still wanted that his will be done in those places. So it happened through various agencies.
The three angels that came
God
to
didn't have to have angels. This is the way that God decided in order to remove himself, right? As we know in human life, oftentimes when people will create a proxy or agents, so that they're not involved themselves directly. Sometimes they do it so that they can have further reach in places where they couldn't reach otherwise. So we have the Rebbe sent messengers, emissaries all over the world, right, to have a greater reach. But sometimes you have an angels in the case of God creating the angels, where so God would have a reach in a place without, so to speak, God needing to reveal himself in that place. And this is the way, this is what's described. Our problem with angels is that the Christians ended up drawing pictures of them. Based off of, sometimes they're based off of what it says in the book of Ezekiel or the book of Isaiah, where there are certain descriptions of the angels. But the fact of the matter is they are spiritual entities carrying out spiritual tasks, and they are divine agents, basically.
I think one of the most daunting questions that arises in me is V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. Okay, what does V'ahavta really mean? How do you know when what are the attributes of V'ahavta? And can I need to create a checklist to be able to say that I'm fulfilling that. Okay, so I guess one of the simple shots is that, excuse me, is that if you emulate Hashem and fulfill his mitzvahs to a T, okay, as prescribed in the Torah and the oral Torah as well, obviously, that kind of encapsulates what V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha should be. But I think that the way we translate the word love is very misleading.
Well, it's a packed word, isn't it? And it's really, in a certain way, it could be a very ambiguous word. And it could mean so many different things. So you have the fiddler, you were just describing the fiddler on the roof love. You know the song, Do You Love Me? Do I Love You? For 25 years I went to shul, kept the Shabbos, kept the kosher. If that's not love, what is? Right? For all of these years, I'm fulfilling all of these mitzvahs. If that's not love, what is, right? But the truth is, okay, so one cannot take that away one iota. But at the very same time, we are meant to feel a love of Hashem. And I want to admit to you right now, this is not an easy thing. At times in my life, I've been able to feel it. Was it genuine? I'll never know. I don't know. But at other times in my life, say like today, for example, I haven't been able to feel that love. And you bring up something very interesting, which is the checklist Judaism. which is an amazing way to make sure that you're doing everything except the essential service. It says in Pirkei Avos that we cannot make the prayers as a I forget the exact language, but it can't be a checklist, right? It has to be supplication before Hashem. And it's a longer discussion, and I'm going to give you a quick fix. Okay? Yisrael, I'm going to give you a quick fix. If you want to love Hashem or get a little tinge of feeling of love for Hashem, all you have to do is think of this following thing, right? And this is, I mean, I use this also with husbands and wives. You know, sometimes I was counseling a wife the other week and said, I don't love my husband. I said, what if God forbid, if something happened to him, would it bother you? He said, of course it would. Then you love him. You're just not expressing your love to him, but of course you love him. You know, if something happened to him, would you go, nah, I don't care? No, you would be. And if God forbid something terrible happened to him, right? So our problem is not the love. Our problem is accessing the love that's there. Right? Yisrael, would you agree with that?
Yes.
So we can do a quick meditation at this point that if God forbid, a group of people would come in and ask me to give up God and, you know, commit to whatever, right? I would be willing to give up my life at this point for Hashem.
Absolutely.
And if you remember that fact, which is true, right? Then that is love of Hashem.
That comes in like now to going out with our Judaism and exposure, when we're dressed or however. Are we afraid to do it or can we do it? You know?
It's a separate question. I don't want to conflate the two. I mean, you know, one could make an argument for either way. You know, and it's going to depend upon the situation. It's going to depend upon where and what you are and everything, right? I mean, if you're in an area and you know that when I was 4 years old, we lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and my family had started getting involved with Judaism, and we were burning stuff in a trash can in the backyard because that's what people used to do in the 60s. And we were singing Hava Nigila Hava, and we were singing, and all of a sudden a big mob of Black people came in the alleyway to our house. I mean, 20, 30 people. I was 4 years old, so my memory might be, you know, maybe it was 10 people. I don't know. But I remember like 20, 30 people, right? And I'm standing there and I say, I'm proud to be Jewish. And I was sure that my whole family would be backing me up, but they had all run to the porch. And they threw a stick at me. I actually had a scar on my face, right? So I was a proud Jew. Okay, but I wouldn't advise someone to do that. If a person is in a situation where they might be accosted and they're not going to have the protection, then one might need to be cautious. Thank God, I've never been in a place where I've had to do that myself. And I've always believed in being a proud Jew. But if somebody who makes an argument that one has to be cautious and you know, safe, one could make an argument for that too. But that's a different question than being willing to give up your Judaism. Yeah, if a person puts on a cap instead of a yarmulke, right? And that doesn't mean that he's you know, giving up God. That's just a matter of safety precautions, you know. So there are different ways to look at that. So loving Hashem, right? So we have to, you know, so Yisrael, we have to fabricate that feeling of love. I mean, there's so many different meditations. Some of them I think are going to be more practical and some of them may be more esoteric. But we have to think of ways that what could I think about Hashem is giving me my life at this very moment, right? You have to think about something that's going to bring that love of Hashem into your heart, even a tiny, tiny bit. And you know what? It says that a good thought, Hashem will consider it as you did it. And so I think when you're thinking the right thoughts in this matter, even if you didn't feel the love, Hashem considers it like you loved him. Hashem considers it like it was done, like you actually did the love. Because so sometimes we might be limited to think about the love and things that will bring us to that love. And maybe we'll get there today, maybe we'll get there tomorrow.
Going back to an earlier discussion here, that if a person in his lifetime has at least one, if not more, very powerful spiritual experiences where you feel Hashem's Shekhinah, it's just there. It completely surrounds you, and you recognize the presence of the Shekhinah. You carry such an experience through your entire life. So if you have a question or a doubt on your love of Hashem, you reflect back on such a moment, and it just, his presence shines in front of your eyes.
That's good. It's a good idea. It's a good thought. Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. We will continue in our understanding of the Shema and then the emotional attachments that are available and the emotional connections available through the Shema, God willing, next week. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Call to.
All two of everyone. Everyone feel well, stay healthy.
Amen.
Amen.